Welcome back in to another action-packed episode of the Between the Hash Marks podcast. As always, I'm Matt Lombardo, joined by my friend, my colleague, my mentor, the esteemed purveyor of Mike Tanier's Too Deep Zone on Substack. Mike Tanier joins me as always, and more than ever, Mike, I'm just concerned for your well-being at this very moment in time.
Well, I'm ignoring the North Pole flex behind you right now. I'm just going to roll with that. Why are you concerned for my well-being?
So I read the Too Deep Zone's mandatory reading each week, the walkthrough on Monday morning. And I knew that something was up last week when you completely stayed away from either Lions Bills or Eagles Steelers as your circlet game. I was concerned, mildly worried at that point in time. And then I read the column, the walkthrough on Monday morning, and you revealed the reason that you stayed away from those two monumental games that I couldn't have possibly enjoyed anymore was because you're going through take brain at the moment. And I just want to make sure that you're doing all right.
Take brain is like a tapeworm for your football soul. And it eats away at your ability to really not just enjoy, but analyze games as big as the Lions Bills game or the Eagles Steelers game. Because you're not just sort of watching them and enjoying them. You're rattling your brain for like, okay, what's the big meaningful takeaway from this? And sometimes a cigar is a cigar, and sometimes a win is a win, and the Bills are the Bills, and the Eagles are the Eagles. And that really, you're right. It had me rattled. I'm glad you're worried about me because it had me rattled last week. Less rattled this week, but I'm still a little shaky.
Good, because they were great games. And I've been there. I've been in your shoes. I mean, when you
Yeah.
cover a team like the New York Giants during the time period that I did, from about 2018 through 2020, you kind of you worry about how to come up with new angles. You worry about how to describe a loss any differently than the 50 other losses that came before them over the last 2 years, right? Like, I get it. So I put together a care package for you.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I hope it's not 2016 to 2020 Giants paraphernalia because that's a hate crime.
It would be considered absolutely. But I, since I've been there, and since there are days when I struggle even now covering the league to come up with new ideas, I got you some Excedrin in case the take brain
Oh,
causes headaches. The
okay.
headaches usually do me in.
Yeah. The Excedrin will be really helpful. About 10 milligrams of THC also can be pretty helpful.
I'll have to go down to the dispensatory around the corner. The other thing is, we're we're
Dispensary.
both we're both Springsteen guys, and
Okay.
few people walking this earth, at least in my opinion, are more creative than Bruce Springsteen. So, in order to get your creative juices flowing, here's Born to Run, Bruce Springsteen's biographies. So, I'll let you borrow this. You can
Yes.
read it. Maybe you'll spark some creativity for you when the future big games come along.
It's his autobiography. I've read portions of it. It's absolutely fantastic. And he is a great inspiration for us because while we both love Bruce Springsteen, let's admit it, he wrote the same song about 60 times over a course of 40 years.
Debatable. Certainly follows themes. The other thing is caffeine helps. I need the caffeine to spark the interest. I always roll with a nitro cold brew. Look at that mug. Nitro cold brew from the
Okay.
coffee shop around the corner. But I feel like this might be even better. It is a special Santa's cookies
Oh,
uh,
that's it.
brew from a local farm around the corner. It is fair fair trade coffee infused, not with syrup, but infused with
Infused.
vanilla, brown sugar, and cinnamon spices. This should fix it for you. This should get the brain going.
Caffeine, Excedrin, and some very loud Springsteen. Very perfect. It all balances each other out. Wait until you're my age and your blood pressure looks like a Falcons money line. And then you'll be a little worried about how many times you go to that coffee shop. Still, no, this sounds like the cure for take brain or what you suffered when you covered the Giants, which was more like chronic depression.
And lastly, but certainly not least, alcohol helps. Alcohol could be a reset.
Okay.
Here is the Southern Tier 2X Christmas Ale with the
Oh,
Christmas spices. It promises to be bold, dynamic, and extraordinary at 8% alcohol by volume. So enjoy.
8%. That's beautiful. Southern Tier, wonderful. I believe they're based out of somewhere in Louisiana. Really, really good micro brewery. You can get it everywhere. I love it. Yeah, I just have to balance the caffeine, the ibuprofen, the alcohol. and the cannabis just right, and I'll be fine. That is the real meaning of Christmas.
You're welcome, and I just hope
Thank
it
you.
gets you through this, because while it was, I gotta hand you this to you, as much as I'm breaking your balls. I gotta hand it to you. It was a brilliant way to structure a column with the teases that breakdown was coming next, only to be dealt your extensive thoughts on Dolphins Texans instead.
I had fun writing about the Dolphins Texans and watching them and getting to watch the Texans, which are not fun to watch, but they're certainly an experience.
And unfortunately, we both got treated to, and the nation, this nation of ours, got treated to an early Wentzmas on Sunday as well, when Patrick Mahomes got injured, and there was no carrying him back onto the field on the next play like there was that Monday night game earlier this season down near the goal line where he previously injured his ankle. Carson Wentz was brought back into our lives on Sunday because Patrick Mahomes got hurt.
He's back in our lives. Mahomes has a high ankle sprain. We're doing the whole Superman thing, saying that he can come back. Mahomes has a game on Saturday, which is important against the Texans, who have a great pass rush. Mahomes has no offensive line. And then next Wednesday, on Christmas, on Wentzmas, on Netflix, we have a Chiefs Steelers game. And both of these games are important for the opponent. They're still important for the Chiefs trying to clinch home field advantage. And I don't know how Andy Reid is going to proceed with these games.
Yeah, I'm with you, but I think I came up with a plan. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I gave this all kinds of extensive thought, meaning that I sat down and pondered it for 45 seconds and think that I came up with the blueprint for Andy Reid in Kansas City. Not that they need to listen to anything I have to say.
While drinking the Christmas cookies. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. I would sit him Saturday. This is a no-brainer. High ankle sprain. You're playing 6 days later against the Texans. You talked about the pass rush. You look at what Devin Stingley Jr. did, Derek Stingley Jr. did on the back end of the secondary with the 2 picks on Sunday. I want no part of that. I want no part of exposing him to that pass rush. And I would see how the rest of this weekend shakes out across the NFL. If they desperately, for whatever reason, need the Steelers win to preserve the bye, which you'll have a better indication based on what Buffalo does and what you do in your own game on Saturday, I consider letting him test it out before the game on Christmas. Let him go through the warm-ups at Acrisure Stadium. Let him see how he feels. But, Mike, here's the thing. There's a lot of teams that need the bye week. There's a lot of teams that need home field advantage. The Chiefs won 3 playoff games last year, 2 of which on the road.
Sure.
They don't need the bye week. They need Patrick Mahomes. If they don't have Patrick Mahomes, especially the way that they're walking this high wire of 1-score games all season long, if Mahomes' injury lingers or gets aggravated, you're toast. You're cooked. There's no more third Lombardi trophy in a row coming to Kansas City, coming to Arrowhead. So I'm going week by week approach more than anything else, and I'm letting Mahomes' health above everything else, combined with the standings, dictate how we move from here starting next week. But he is not playing Saturday, in my opinion.
I don't think he can. I think that we're playing a little game here. Well, it's Mahomes and we can do this. I know there's past precedent. I know he's come back from ankle sprains incredibly quickly. We're talking about like a 5-day turnaround against a playoff caliber opponent. I don't necessarily see it. This isn't, now it's Carson Wentz. It's not Chad Henne, who is basically just an offensive coordinator out there throwing screen passes.
Right.
Wentz, for all his goofiness, can escape pass rushers, plays YOLO ball, has like a little like weak T version of Mahomes version of game he can throw out there. And why have him? Why bother with him if you can't trust him for this 1 week? I think it's a very slim chance that the Patriots help by taking care of business against the Bills. The Bills are at home against the Patriots. That's not going to save you in that playoff tiebreaker scenario. Wentz could, or your own pass rush could, against a Texans team that allows so many sacks, that cannot get out of its own way offensively because everything is funneled around the idea that C.J. Stroud takes the snap and goes running for his life. That's your best bet. I like the way you're thinking there, because then you can make another decision come Wednesday. The one thing I disagree with is I think they need the home field advantage too. I do not see that team going into Buffalo, even going into Pittsburgh or Baltimore. I think that the Chiefs would be very vulnerable with the style of play they have right now.
Vulnerable for sure, but beyond just the pass rush, we saw last week that if Nico Collins isn't a factor for the Houston Texans, then that offense really ceases to exist. It becomes the Joe Mixon show.
Right.
But when you look at McDuffie, if he can take away Nico Collins And you look at Chris Jones and that pass rush up front, if they limit what the Texans are able to do, Carson Wentz may only need to score 17 points on offense to win that game. And then you might effectively have it locked up with 2 weeks to go, depending on how everything else plays out in the standings. And I would, at that point, I'm resting Mahomes as long as necessary to get him healthy for the playoffs, because these last 3 weeks don't necessarily matter. I think that they could go into Buffalo and it wouldn't be the shock of all shocks and shock of all to end the world if they beat Buffalo. I think they could beat Pittsburgh on the road based on what I saw out of Pittsburgh in Philadelphia on Sunday. But if they don't have Mahomes, if you tweak that injury trying to lock up that bye week, to me, you're doing yourself a disservice.
That's it. Obviously, it's banal to say it. They need Mahomes. They can't risk him any further. It's whether Andy Reid looks at this situation and turns into that sort of like Riverboat Reid type of thing and makes a call here that I don't think they should make.
Right. And we talked about the Eagles. Sunday, I turned it as Judgment Day across the NFL. Remember back in 1997 in college football, where it was like each of the top 8 teams all played each other, and ABC had the big promo, Judgment Day this Saturday. Penn State, Michigan, Alabama versus Georgia, blah, 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 blah. That's what this felt like. I know Take Brain forced you to sit.
You pulled from 1997, and you pulled a big, big promotional thing out of there. That's good. That's what I couldn't do. I couldn't call it Judgment Day. It wasn't there. It wasn't sitting there for me. Anyway, you did, and we did, and there were things to take away from those games.
And it felt like in the NFC more than ever, more than anything. It felt like, just to touch on it briefly, that the Packers seem to have arrived as a legitimate threat in the NFC. The Vikings look no longer just like an insurgent threat as the number 1 seed, but based on all the injuries in Detroit, they could potentially wind up with the bye week, Sam Darnold and all. And the best team out of the bunch, the healthiest team out of the bunch, might just be the Philadelphia Eagles. And Mike, I don't know, it's starting to feel a little bit like, unlike 2 or 3 weeks ago, where Detroit was off on a shelf doing their own thing and just cruising into the second round of the playoffs at Ford Field, the NFC might be the Eagles to lose right now.
It's starting to feel that way. And the big takeaway for me, it was the injuries. The injuries suffered by the Detroit Lions. Carlton Davis, starting cornerback, hurt. Sounds like he might be out for several weeks. I don't have it officially in front of me. Khalil Dorsey, the guy who got seriously hurt, he's important. He's been a depth guy for them for a lot of the season. He's gone for the year. Alan McNeil, who is a really important part of their defensive line, out for the year. We all know Aiden Hutchinson is out for the year. Alex Anzalone has been out for a long time. Marcus Davenport's been out for a long time. Malcolm Rodriguez, a big part of their defense at linebacker, is out for the year. And you kind of saw, this is a team that spent like a month covering up for it. And then you kind of saw, well, we got Quan Alexander out there covering guys up the seam, and suddenly you can throw to the backs at will, okay, against the Detroit Lions. Now you got Armstead out there, kind of the human penalty machine on one side. I think they got Rakestraw back, but this is a Lions team suddenly that is so banged up on defense that it's hard to look at them and say, oh yeah, they're a cut above the Eagles, cut above the Packers, cut above the Vikings. They're simply not right now.
Right. And, you hinted at some of the injuries, and I think the Elaine McNeil one is the biggest one of all. He's been so disruptive along that defensive line. Like 29 different players have started on defense for the Lions so far this year. I opened up their depth chart on ESPN.com to continue to do some research on the Unsung Heroes piece for the Lions that drops tomorrow morning, just to kind of get a feel for who I might be missing on the roster. And it's a sea of red. It might as well be Arrowhead Stadium on paper. Looking at the Lions depth chart, they have 17 players on injured reserve, 21 players dealing with some sort of injury designation, whether questionable, out, or on IR. We touched on the Chiefs needing or not needing the bye week. The Lions need that bye week. If there's any chance that any of these guys get back and healthy or even close to it, or guys who are questionable can be upgraded to active or whatever the case may be, it's a minor miracle that they took the Bills to the brink in a fugazi comeback in the fourth quarter with what they're dealing with right now.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't necessarily let up for Detroit, because you mentioned how tough the conference is. They have the Vikings in the final week. I'm looking ahead. Okay, the Bears look like a gimme. I don't think anyone's going to consider the 49ers a gimme down the stretch. They're like an angry, angry team. They've got injuries of their own. And there's no margin for error right now because the Eagles' schedule lets up after the Commanders, right?
Yeah, it's Giants and Cowboys.
Right, right. So there's a lot to play for in the last couple of weeks in the NFC, and the bye week is going to be huge. And you're right. Every indicator, including things like DVOA, say the Eagles are playing the best football really in the NFL right now. Everybody's got that bad loss recently. Obviously, the Bills had one 2 weeks ago. Any team you can name has got the trip game. Eagles haven't had a trip game since what? The Buccaneers, week 4.
Right. And that was a game where they didn't have AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. So
Right.
you were completely shorthanded, and it was the Saquon Barkley show. They've won 10 in a row since then, which is unfathomable with the schedule they've had. And in today's NFL, that you would win, you'd see a team rattle off a 10-game winning streak, but they've won in different ways, right? They proved on Sunday they can win without Saquon Barkley after Saquon was in the medical tent or on the sideline for most of that first half after that big hit by Minka Fitzpatrick down near the goal line. And Kellen Moore and Jalen Hurts, I got to tip the cap to you, Mike, tip the podcasting hat that I'm not wearing. They might have been listening to this last week when you called for them going back to airing it out to AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. They combined for 229 yards and 2 touchdowns against a really good Steelers defense, a defense that has Minka Fitzpatrick, that has Joey Porter Jr., that has a really good front seven. And they aired it out and they put on a show. And I think what really impressed me, Mike, was that they basically got into a rock fight with the Steelers, and it was never that close. I mean, they kept them at arm's length the entire game. They matched the grittiness of Mike Tomlin's defense. They gave up 2 lost fumbles in the first half and only allowed 3 points off of those turnovers combined. It was an impressive win, and it just feels like they've turned the corner right now.
Absolutely. By the way, to correct myself, the Panthers game might have been a trip up game, but like when your trip up game is, oh, well, this opponent kept converting 3rd and forever against you and you still won in the end. That's not much of a trip up game. You're right. Everything you described, the Steelers get these 2 turnovers early. There's your Steelers turnover takeaway game. They're playing it, and the Eagles don't play along. The Eagles score points on the other end. That's a big deal. And yeah, the pitch and catch with Devonta Smith, AJ Brown, it looked a lot like the first half of last year. It looked a lot like 2022. It looks very simple where you can kind of see that they're get open routes, more or less. It's like drop, look, see where he's at, throw the ball to a spot in the field, throw him open a lot of times with Devonta Smith. Here's a stat I just pulled up because I've been doing some stat research. Eagles have only drawn 1 defensive pass interference penalty all year.
Wow.
The Vikings lead the league in pass interference penalties drawn. People are trying to cover Justin Jefferson, and that's a problem. Covering AJ Brown's a problem. Covering Smitty's a problem. The thing is, Hurts doesn't like throwing to them when they're pretty covered. You get pass interference by taking like the risky shot at the guy. You take more of those risky shots, yes, you might get a pick or 2. You're going to get pass interference. You'll probably get fewer sacks, which can also help. You know which team leads the league in defensive pass interference penalties committed?
I'm going to go with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
They're high. It's the Detroit Lions.
Oh, I forgot about Terrion Arnold, the walking penalty flag.
Yes, the walking flagman. And Carlton Davis has also been a flagman. He draws a lot of tougher assignments, in fairness. He's gone. But the backups aren't going to be helpful there. It's just something to keep in mind as you work your way through this and say, well, why should the Eagles take more risks to AJ, more to Smitty? By the way, there's other guys, Jalen. There's other guys you can throw.
Goddard.
Yeah. But for those 2,
Jahan Dotson, the invisible man.
Yes, the invisible receiver. It's great because you're watching. He ran 23 routes on Sunday. Really? Did he really? And he was never open. It's remarkable.
Didn't even look his direction, right? But you just look at the NFC, and the Packers are now in the mix. The Vikings are now in the mix. The Eagles appear to be in a class all their own, and the Rams. We've talked about the Rams the last couple of weeks on this podcast. They found a way in a deluge of rain and wind and coldness in Santa Clara to take down San Francisco last week on Thursday night. They're chugging along. It feels like, and I've said this a few times, we all thought going into the year that the AFC was going to be this ridiculous gauntlet with so many teams, with the Dolphins figuring into the mix and the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, they're going to make some noise. And is this going to be the year that Deshaun Watson figures it out, and on and on and on? Burrow's Bengals, who I still think might maybe have a chance. But in the NFC, man, there's only like 2 spots that have been wrapped up, that have been clinched, because it's so competitive, and it's no longer the Lions and everyone else by any stretch of the imagination.
In fairness to the Rams, their MVP is Puka Nacua, and their runner-up MVP is the Seattle Seahawks.
Yes.
And now you've got a Geno Smith injury there, so I don't put them in the pedestal with those other teams. But yeah, everything going on in the NFC North, it's remarkable. These are strong teams. I'm trying to find competitive edges, and you just keep looking at those big four, and the Eagles, Lions, Packers, and Vikings, and they're just full of competitive edges that we're just going to have to see them against each other at the end of the playoffs after we dispatch the Buccaneers and whatever, and get serious and see what these teams can do.
For sure. And, we talk all the time on this podcast about the big names, the A.J. Browns, Devonta Smiths, and Jalen Hurts, the Patrick Mahomeses and Josh Allens, and the George Pickenses, and the Russell Wilsons this season, and the Justin Jeffersons, and all of these superstars that are playing key roles in these teams' runs to the postseason. And I've started a series on Between the Hash Marks of the unsung heroes, and so far written the unsung heroes in Kansas City, which was pretty tough to write when you have Mahomes and Reid as the driving force. And this late Monday night, the Bills dropped the Bills unsung heroes on the site. Basically, I'm asking an executive around the league their pick for the unsung hero on the roster, then I'm naming my 3. It should be a lot of fun and gives individual fan bases a chance to see what the Between the Hash Mark Substack is all about.
That's cool. I saw the Bills one.
Yes.
I think I spaced on the Chiefs one. Who are the Chiefs? Do you have it handy? Who are the Chiefs?
Yeah, I have it right here. The executive basically called out the middle of the offensive line, Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith, because they're not getting a whole lot of interior pressure on Mahomes. I went with Noah Gray, that he'll eventually, he seems like he's stepping out of Travis Kelce's shadow a little bit more each week, and has become a playmaker for Mahomes. Mahomes has a 119.4 passer rating when throwing his direction. So Noah Gray probably going to be more of a factor down the stretch. Tershawn Wharton, you talk about Chris Jones all the time as one of the best interior pass rushers in the league. Wharton is a nice compliment there, provides some relentless pressure. And then I might have to scratch this one from the list, but maybe not after Harrison Butker kicked the chip shot into row 7. I had Matthew Wright because he bailed him out in that game against the Chargers.
He can stay in there. Absolutely. He had to come in as a backup kicker and made a bunch of big kicks. And
yes,
I also love the interior offensive line for the Chiefs. The Chiefs aren't a team with a bad line. They're a team with bad tackles. And I keep looking at them and saying, hey, you want to beat the Houston Texans? You got Carson Wentz. I have this crazy idea. It's called running the ball. It's called handoffs.
yes.
And if you hand the ball off up the middle consistently to Pacheco and Hunt and who knows, whoever else, and just play power football and run a little bit of play action, you can beat this Texans team that goes out there and gives up 30 sacks and 30 penalties a game. Just do that. But I absolutely love that list. We're going to do it for the Eagles, aren't we?
We are. And the Bills, I'll just give you the one from the executive. I spoke to a general manager, and he said Khalil Shakir, which, I thought might have been cherry picking just a little bit, but the explanation makes sense. Understated piece of the puzzle at what Buffalo does best, which is stretching the field. Great competitor, and always seems to be a little bit underrated. I'd slide Mac Hollins into that slot if I were naming a wide receiver, but I can't argue with the rationale behind Shakir, even if I think he's really vital to what they do.
That's it. He's not exactly under the radar. I think every fantasy person knows Shakir, but you don't look at him as a wide receiver 1. He's their wide receiver 1. He's sort of their 3rd and 4 make a play guy, and he's very, very good. And he's made a difference this year because we kept saying who's Allen going to throw to. Well, it turns out it's a dozen different guys, but he's number 1A of that group.
Absolutely. And I have the Eagles dropping on Thursday on the site Between the Hash Marks. The Lions are up next on Wednesday morning. But I figure we could delve into some of our Eagles selections for their unsung heroes, because, again, it's been the Saquon Barkley show for about 8 or 9 of these wins. Jalen Hurts chipping in with the tush-push touchdowns and really as the catalyst against the Steelers. But even though this has been one of the more well-rounded and talented homegrown rosters in the league, there are still guys flying under the radar as unsung heroes. I'll let you go first here with one of your selections.
I'm going to start with Kenneth Gainwell. We've been talking about Barkley. Barkley needs a rest once in a while. He needed a rest a couple times, like we said last week. Gainwell's averaging 4.6 yards per carry. He has 265 yards on the year. He only has 12 catches this year, but it seems like a lot of them are very important. And he had two very important catches on Sunday against the Steelers, including one where it was third and long near the red zone. And Hurts did this thing that I think is new to him. It's called checking down. Checking down to the back, and he checks down to Gainwell, and there's two defenders there, and he splits them. He splits them, gets the first down, gets the Eagles close to tush push territory. With behind every great man, there's a great backup running back, and I think Gainwell's been having a heck of a year. Quietly been a contributor for the Eagles for a couple seasons.
Really impressive selection for Mr. Anti-running back over here.
It's we're not. I'm doing a thing on running backs tomorrow. You'll see it on the Two Deep Zone.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. But Gainwell's certainly a vital piece of what they've been doing and a cog in the machine. I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going with Nolan Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Because you look at Nolan Smith, he seems to have shed that first round bust label that people like to heap on him really prematurely. It was never really fair. 6.5 sacks so far this year, 3 in the past 5 games. So he's coming into his own in the Eagles' most important games of the year so far. PFF credits him with 24 pressures and 222 pass rush snaps. So he's pressuring the quarterback on 10% of his pass rush reps, which is a pretty big deal. That's what you want to see. And I think he's a pretty big reason why that front seven has been so disruptive. We could talk about Josh Sweat. You could talk about what Milton Williams is doing along the interior, and obviously Jalen Carter, vital to what they do. Nolan Smith is chipping in some quality reps and developing a nice niche for himself.
Absolutely. And folks, sometimes it takes the edge rusher a year or two to develop. That is not an unusual thing. Now, again, he looked particularly bad early in his career, but it's not unusual to see these guys have a hard time figuring things out, trying to get around the edge and discovering that the offensive linemen are bigger, stronger, and faster, and them needing the counterpunch. You
Reggie
mentioned
White might have looked pretty bad in his career if he were, playing for Matt Patricia.
as opposed to playing for the Memphis Showboats,
Yeah.
SFL, which is where he was before Buddy got a hold of him. Yes, absolutely. You mentioned my other guy here. It is Milton Williams, kind of a quiet contributor with all these guys on the defensive line, playing next to Jalen Carter, playing in tandem with Jordan Davis. Of course, I got the PFF numbers up here, so they might not match everyone else's. 6 sacks, 23 pressures. And this is a guy that's a lot of times rotating. He also has several batted passes, which is something you kind of lose track of. But when your batting passes down, I think the Eagles had a couple of those this week. Another guy who coming in waves, making contributions to a defense that's really been outstanding this year.
Yeah, and that turnaround has been nothing short of miraculous. I still think that Brian Flores and what he's done with that defense in Minnesota probably makes him the leader in the clubhouse for an assistant coach of the year award. But, I got some pushback on social media, mostly from Eagles fans. Look at the job that Vic Fangio has done, and it's hard to argue with that. They went from being something like 29th or 30th in defensive DVOA last year to the #1 ranked defense across the league this year. Nothing short of a miraculous turnaround for them, and I think Fangio deserves a lot of credit for that. But they're also getting guys like Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith and Carter and Milton Williams and all these guys. They've turned Zach Baun from a virtual nobody to an all-pro throughout the course of this year. So obviously a lot of credit to Fangio, and that defense has really improved by leaps and bounds.
Oh yeah, Fangio's been great, but I will say it's like here, Vic, here's this Super Bowl defense from 2 years ago, plus 15 draft picks and some other guys make it work. Whereas Flores, it's like, okay, here's everyone we can afford because we're still paying leftover Kirk Cousins money and crazy stuff like that. So here's some undrafted rookies and Harrison Smith at age 37. See what you can make out of it, and he's done it. So I would still go with Flores. That's not against Fangio. By the way, my runner-up, and it was too controversial for me to go to, was Fred Johnson.
Okay.
And the Eagles fans like, Micah Parsons ate him for breakfast. He had trouble, this and that. You watch teams around the league when you have to go to your backup tackle, and Fred, he said to back up Mulata and Johnson this year. It's usually an absolute travesty. It is open season, whatever. So you come out of these games and it's like, well, we ran the ball well still. He was able to run block, and our quarterback isn't dead. That's a win. So I was going to say the unsung hero is the journeyman backup swing tackle, started at both sides and didn't get his quarterback killed. But that's like the runner-up. I can't do that over Milton Williams. I'm sure if we started listing guys, there's a lot of other people we could put on that list.
Yeah, I don't want to give out the entire
Okay.
article on for what's coming down the pike on Thursday, but I will say this: nice pick by Milton Williams. You're in some good company.
Oh, excellent, excellent, excellent. Want to do another one?
Yeah, let's do another. Let's go with the Steelers,
Okay.
the team that the Eagles beat on Sunday afternoon. But I still think Pittsburgh is going to make some noise in the playoffs. You want to go first on this one as well?
I'm going to go first, and I'm going to stick with edge rushers. And we talk about a team that had some injuries on their pass rush. Right now, I know TJ Watt's banged up. He's been healthy most of the year. Lonzo Highsmith was out for a portion of the year. And this guy was also out for a while. Nick Herbig.
Oh,
Uh,
you took mine. I love it. Great minds think alike. I love it.
I took yours.
That's okay. That's okay. Just shows what an unsung hero he is. Go ahead. Let's hear it. Let's hear the
Unsung hero. Again, I'm pulling up the PFF stats, which aren't necessarily 100% accurate. 6 sacks, 13 harries, and just when Highsmith was out, he was not really missed. Okay, I know Herbig also has some big plays. I'm kind of spacing right now on which Steelers defender made which big play at which time, but they just always have waves of these guys, and Herbig is one of them.
I'm with you. You talk about all the attention that Cam Hayward gets, that TJ Watt gets, that the back end with Minkah Fitzpatrick and all those guys that they get. Herbig just lives in opposing backfields, and you line him up, and he goes and gets the quarterback. 4.5 sacks, second or third on the team in sacks. I talked to Brian Baldinger about him a couple weeks ago for the column Four Downs, and he was like, Herbig is a guy out of Wisconsin. TJ Watt is a guy out of Wisconsin, and he stepped 1 foot in the building and asked, "Where is TJ Watt?" And he's been following him around like a puppy dog ever since, absorbing everything. And he's played his way into a marquee role with that defense.
Amazing how the Steelers keep doing it. They get these guys mostly, not TJ, but second, third, fourth round. Like, let's take a system fit edge rusher, and they always get value out of them. Part of it is because they always know what the system is. They know exactly what they want. They aren't changing coaches every year and a half, so that helps. But it's amazing how they do that.
And I'll give you one more. Calvin Austin, wide receiver.
Another guy. That's why we got two now. We got two.
We do have two. I went Calvin Austin because George Pickens is the highlight reel machine, obvious top of the depth chart receiver. You trade for Mike Williams, thinking that he's going to be a catalyst and a worthy complement to Pickens, and mixed results there on that trade. But Calvin Austin Jr. just makes plays. 16.1 yards per reception, 4 touchdowns, 452 receiving yards, having a nice little year for himself. For the Steelers, a team that runs the ball 87 times per game and then throws it to Pat Fryermuth on their 12 passes that they throw per game. And he's going to wind up with 650 receiving yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns at least.
And a punt return touchdown.
And a punt return touchdown, yeah. Can't forget about that.
And going for my number 3 guy, I'm going for the kicker. I'm going for Chris Boswell. 11 of 13 from 50-plus yards this year. 7 of 8 from 40 to 49 yards. 11 perfect from inside of 40, and he has 20 kicks inside 40. The drive stall for the Steelers a lot because they don't have necessarily the best passing game, and Boswell has just been money for them, and it's really, they have 2 games that were all field goal victories.
Yeah,
one against the Ravens, one against the Falcons, and that's Boswell being automatic.
I'll go Darnell Washington here, the big tight end, the rookie. Fryermuth gets all the headlines, gets the big contract. He's the red zone machine. But you look at some of the blocks that Darnell Washington throws, you line him up at fullback and he'll just destroy a blitzing corner, coming off the edge. Needs to work on his hands a little bit, but for what the Steelers do and moving him around as a versatile weapon, a little bit of an unsung hero, in my opinion.
I loved him coming out of college. He's the most unusual looking athlete.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say something because, here's a 6'6" tight end. Here's a 6'6" tight end. Here's a 6'6.5" tight end who looked like he was 7'3" when they were all walking out at the scouting combine. And you're right. I don't think he's ever going to catch more than 20, 25 passes per season. But there's a place in the world for the number 2 tight end who is an absolute mauler in the blocking game, who is athletic enough that you have to account for him in the passing game because he really is faster, bigger than most of your guys. So if you do try to get him the ball in the flat, you've got a problem there. And they're making maximum use of him there in Pittsburgh because, again, it's almost 6 offensive line level things. We're going to pound the ball. We're going to protect Russell Wilson. And then we just have this extra, almost like big man touchdown threat in there if we decide to go in a different direction.
Mike, what's your circlet game coming up this weekend?
Did I put Thursday night's game down?
You did.
I did put Thursday night's game down. Look at 2 teams going in different directions. The Chargers and the Broncos. Now, the Chargers' loss against the Buccaneers is the only reason we still have to care about the Bengals, Colts, and someone else who's still.
Bengals aren't dead yet. Don't sleep on Burrow's Bengals. Don't sleep on postseason Burrow.
The reason we have to hear this, okay, so it's a tale of two things.
They have
Okay.
a 5.7% chance of making the playoffs, up from 1% last week.
Okay, yeah, good. The reason we have to hear this, so two things happen.
Burrow's leading the league in passing.
Yeah, because they have to throw the ball 1,000,000 times because they almost lost to the Titans. All right. Taking a deep breath. So the Broncos play the Colts. The Colts take a lead on them. The Colts almost take a 20-6 lead on them, but Jonathan Taylor decides to try to spike the ball at the 1-yard line instead of scoring. The Broncos have to do a gut check game. Defense comes through. Special teams comes through. Bo Nix settles down after 3 interceptions and delivers the passes he needs to make. And the Broncos steamroll the Colts by the end of that game. Chargers take I think a 17-10 or a 17-7 lead against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a good opponent. They're forcing turnovers. They force a fumble. They get the ball at midfield. And the mighty Chargers stop. They just stop. Justin Herbert, I had my 2 highlights. I went trending on the socials. Gonna take the rest of the day off here. I'm still awesome. Stops doing anything. Harbaugh starts doing the handoff to Gus Edwards on every first down, him and Romans for a gain of 1. So now, like, Herbert has to do something because it's not 2nd and 3, whatever. Defense stops. So you have these teams going in different directions. They're facing off. I think the Broncos are a legitimate playoff team. I think the Chargers are a playoff team by default because they beat so many teams like the Titans and the Raiders along the way. But we'll see on Thursday night. And again, you've got Bengals on the brain. You might have Bengals on the brain Friday morning because you might be looking at Chargers team that improved the Bengals and Colts and Dolphins' chances of squeaking into that final wild card because they didn't have what it takes to beat a kind of vulnerable Broncos team.
I'm going to ping you the Joe Burrow playoff chances on Friday morning after that game when they go up from 5.7% to like 12%. That we're just doubling, we're redoubling every week and getting ready for Burrow to make the wild card round.
You know what would make my Grinch heart grow 3 sizes plus 1? The Chargers tanking out and either Burrow or Tua making the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then an entire offseason of listening to how great Justin Herbert is from all the great minds of YouTube, the film sniffing bros of YouTube, talking about how great Herbert is. And it's like, oh, he collapsed. He had a 2-game lead to make the playoffs, 3-game lead to make the playoffs. He collapsed. Please tell me again how he's so much better than Burrow and like on this different plane from Tua, not kind of on the same plane as Tua. Keep telling me this. I love hearing it, but that's sour grapes. That's not what we're here to talk about today.
By the way, not for nothing, I usually utilize the Command Center's 3rd TV, the 3 TV walls for NFL Red Zone. But after, hearing you extol the virtues of Colts Broncos, the 4 o'clock window was just 3 games. It was Colts Broncos, Eagles Steelers on the main TV, and then Lions Bills on the right. And I will tell you this, for as much as we talk about the Broncos surviving Bo Nix's waking up and realizing that he's a rookie in the 3 interceptions and how poorly he played, that was a clinic defensively by the Denver Broncos. The Patrick Surtain interception was highlight reel worthy, and we might never again see a wide receiver throwback pass to the quarterback after my guy Nick Bonito intercepts the pass. It goes down in the scorebook as a fumble recovery, 50 yards for a touchdown. That was one of the more impressive defensive plays that I've seen in a while. And the Broncos seem to make 1 or 2 plays like that every single week in the second half when it matters, when they can close teams out. Nick Bonito's having a hell of a year, by the way. I think that he's a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker who should make the Pro Bowl, maybe even get some second team All-Pro recognition, but burn that play forever. You talk about burn pits in Iraq, throw that play in a burn pit. The wide receiver quarterback throwback pass, Bonito here henceforth ended that from any playbook across the league.
Well, part of it is you're getting the Anthony Richard Tatibo experience, which helps a little bit. But I'm going to pull this up here. I have these stats that are handy for later in the week. Denver Broncos lead the NFL in interception return yards with 413 interception return yards. That includes a 100-yard pick six by Patrick Surtain, a pick six by Nick Benito against the Browns, a pick six by Jaquan McMillan against the Browns. But wait, there's more. That play you described was not an interception return. That was a fumble recovery return. Benito has that one. Brandon Jones also had a long fumble scoop and score on a Spencer Rattler. So like if you add it all up, it's hard to add the fumble yards because it's hard to get them all in there. Broncos blow away the league in terms of return yardage by their defense. That's amazing. The question is, can you count on that when you're moving forward? Can you count on that against the Chiefs? Maybe with if Carson Wentz is out there, maybe, et cetera. That's the part that's tricky.
Sure, but even back during the beginning of the year, nobody thought of this team as a playoff contender. Right now, with Bo Nix going through his development, and yet here we are, a leader in the clubhouse for a wild card spot. My circlet game, major NFC playoff implications. Vikings Seahawks. How did the Seahawks respond to Sunday night's drubbing by the Packers? And that was a beatdown, especially from the Green Bay front seven. Depending on what happens with banged up Detroit Lions and the injuries they're going through, this game could help the Vikings take a big step if they handle business and they make a statement towards maybe even the 1 seed or winning the NFC North. How crazy would that be? And it's a game that Seattle absolutely has to have if they want to keep the Rams at arm's length and avoid that Week 18 NFC West Championship game that I'm dying to watch. They need this game to avoid that.
Of course, Geno Smith is banged up. It sounds like he's going to play. If Sam Howell plays, they're going to lose by 3 touchdowns. It's going to be
Brian Flores. Can you imagine Brian Flores salivating about blitzing Sam Howell 83% of the time?
Right. It'll be like Sam Howell just crumple. He'll just give up and like take a knee in the backfield with his sack tendencies and all. But yeah, it's hard to get behind the Seattle Seahawks right now. It's easier to get behind the Vikings. One thing about the Vikings, they've been winning everywhere. They're a different team at home than on the road. Their home field advantage has been ridiculous. Not just it's a home field advantage when you look at things like penalty differentials and stuff like that. Teams are committing false starts with the crowd noise, the skull, everything else like that. Let's see if they can bring that with them on the road to Seattle, because remember, unless they can overturn the Lions, which is now possible, they're going to be traveling on the road in the playoffs, and they're not necessarily going to be able to say, hey, maybe we get a couple of homer calls.
Yeah, and not for nothing, I'm a little bit annoyed at the NFL going into this weekend.
Okay.
I mean, you got to love the NFL stomping all over the college football playoff, right?
Oh, yeah.
In past years, the NFL didn't play a single Saturday game until the college football season was officially over. That's why there were Saturday games, because there was no Saturday college football. But you look at this week, and it might not be Week 15's Cocoa Bananas Judgment Day schedule, but the games they're putting on Saturday, 2 games with monumental playoff implications. They're playing those games on Saturday. Look, next weekend, when there's no college football playoff games and it becomes the bowl games on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, no Saturday football, nothing to watch on Saturday after Christmas before New Year's. And, I have no problem with Roger Goodell and the NFL flexing their muscles on Christmas Day and stomping the NBA in the ratings, which they'll do again. Netflix will put out that, 25 million more people watched the games on Netflix than watched the NBA games. It'll be a big win. But what the heck are you doing stomping all over the first ever 12-team college football playoff by putting these games? You look at Texans Chiefs, you look at Ravens Steelers on Saturday up against those college football playoff games. I'm annoyed. I'm fed up. I'm angry. It is what
I'll say a couple things. First of all, the following week, they might flex some Saturday games still, I think.
Is that right?
I'm not sure, though, so don't hold me that. Secondly, I think what you say is going to change. The rights holder is going to pick up the phone. And what I feel like happened in the playoffs, got announced, and at the same time, the NFL was doing what they're doing, and somebody forgot to make the phone call and say, guys, we have a log jam on these games. Because I don't think the rights holders want this at all. In the short term, you got younger kids. You can't just run on Saturday to the bar and just be like,
well, I'm running to Happy Valley. I'll be tailgating in Happy Valley at 7 a.m. for Penn State SMU at noon.
In fairness, some of the people I normally watch with, like, hey, you want to go to the bar on Saturday? I can go to the bar on Saturday. I can drink more. because I don't have to write about the games. I can get an Uber home. My son will be home from college. He can take me home, etc. And they're like, oh no, for Penn State, we do this, 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 this. I'm going to be off doing that. I was like, okay, whatever. But like, I don't like it either. I think it's dumb. I think the rights holders again are going to call and say, hey, give us inventory on Thursday nights and Friday nights and things like that. Don't bottleneck everything on Saturday afternoon. But I might just go and just bask in the chaos in a sports bar, because it could be a lot of fun to see all these different fan bases watching all these different things.
Great, yeah, great sports bar day. You got all the playoff games going, all the big playoff implications, NFL games going. Mike, what's coming up on the Two Deep Zone over the next couple of days?
Writing a little bit about the running back renaissance that never really happened this year. Okay,
Wow,
we love
you really got over that tape brain pretty quick.
Yeah. We love Saquon Barkley. We love Derrick Henry. We love the other guys. What does it mean? Absolutely nothing. Okay, kind of like Spaceballs there. And I'm gonna throw cold water on that, which I'm sure will make me very popular on the NFL, on the internet. Later on the week, I'm doing a big stat pack. So if you heard me kind of loaded with like penalty stats, interception return stats, missed field goal stats, things like that, it's the hidden stats. And I'm only doing it for the playoff teams because I don't want to talk about the Jets anymore in my lifetime. But this is going to be indispensable for people who really want to sort of handicap the games coming up. Lots of hidden statistics that are hard to find. I'm going to put them on a platter for people. What do you got coming up?
Love it. We're continuing it between the hash marks, the unsung heroes pieces for every playoff team. We got a little bit of a late start, so we're backing up on the teams that have already clinched, and then moving forward, once teams clinch, they're going to be featured throughout the week. But Wednesday morning, you'll wake up to the Lions unsung heroes, and on Thursday morning, folks will wake up to the Eagles unsung heroes. And they got a little bit of a preview on this podcast, but some great insight from NFL executives, including a scouting director identifying the Eagles unsung heroes, and a coach talking about his bust out pick for unsung hero on the Lions. And Friday, the annual mailbag, where people, subscribers get to ask their questions, and I'll pose them to coaches and executives and scouts and agents around the league. And I'm the conduit to the league. Ask your questions, get their answers.
You're the conduit to the league. I'm the conduit to the spreadsheets.
Yes.
You need to get something dug out for it, and together we can bring you all sorts of football knowledge. Of course, we say this at the end of a hour-long podcast that you already listened to, so it's not like, if you come this far, I hope you like us.
And if you do, please go ahead and subscribe in the Apple Podcast Store, Spotify. Check us out on my YouTube channel at Matt Lombardo 975, and leave us those 5-star reviews, particularly on Apple Podcasts. They really help grow the show, push us up in the algorithm, make us easier to find. Leave us the 5-star review. Let us know what you like about the show, maybe what you don't like so much, whatever it is. We will read it. If you rip us, if you roast us, we will read it on the air. And of course, subscribe to Mike Tanier's Two Deep Zone. It's mandatory for any NFL fan. It's the best thing you're going to read every Monday. As partial as I am to 4 downs on between the hash marks, I drop my daughter off at the school bus, I get my coffee, and I read the Two Deep Zone before I start any other work. So make sure you subscribe to Mike.
Thank you very much. Are we done here?
Sure. We'll talk to you next week.
Monday, we're going to record, right?
Yes. Talk to you Monday.
See everybody next week.